This is CXO Secrets, the podcast that takes you inside the mind of business leaders and reveals the strategies behind their success. Coming up in today's show.
Once the incident has been identified, it's already very late. Time is super critical. Every decision or every change in decision could cost a lot of time and often a lot of money. Most often, everybody wants to jump in and help. And sometimes that actually causes more time loss and more problems because there are multiple directions. It's unclear for the organization, usually huge organizations. They need to know where to go. It's in these kind of situations, simplicity, clear instructions, clear direction. This is the most important part. I think a lot of people in stress situations respond well to simple and clear leadership and directions. When people have something that they can do, they immediately spring into action rather than letting people try to figure out what they have to do at a certain time, right? That brings in insecurity, uncertainty, puts in a lot of room for emotions and friction. And I think the sooner, the faster there is clear leadership, clear instructions on where to go, this usually works best.
The CXO Secrets podcast is powered by EDS, going beyond connections. Find out about upcoming C-level events, experiences, and insights at edsxevents.com. Itay Livne, Chief Information Security Officer at Sixt. Thank you for joining us on CXO Secrets.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Sixt is a car rental company, thousands of locations, more than 100 countries. Where are you based, though, and what does a regular day look like for you, Itay?
I'm currently living in Munich with my wife for the last couple of years since I started with Sixt. We moved here from Israel, Tel Aviv, and so far we're loving it. Munich is great. So Sixt is, most of our customers are, it's a B2C business. We do have also a B2B part as well. So the majority of what we're focusing on is keeping everybody's data safe, keeping our data safe, keeping the company safe and running. And that translates to, I would say, what most of normal companies have to run in their security organizations, right? You have the governance and risk part, so you have the security operations and so on. We also run a pretty big physical security area because we have these aspects as well. A lot of what we do is in the physical domain. So that's, I would say, trying to divide these areas, give each one of them the attention they need when they need it. But I also have to admit I have very great teams, people in my team that also help me with that.
It's an interesting point that you make there. Obviously, B2C organization, lots of organizations have those information security, challenges, things they need to do, but with the fleet of vehicles that you have under your management as well. Whereas I guess in manufacturing, there's lots of operational technology, things that CISOs and their teams need to look after as far as the vehicles are concerned. As cars increasingly become computers on wheels these days, I guess that might mean that there's a chunk of work for you and the partners and the manufacturers whom you work with to ensure that that core asset of yours remains safe and secure for the users of your service as well.
So I would say we're mostly working in preparing for this. I think we're not quite there yet where these things are actually computers on wheels in terms of the attack surface that they have and so on. These things have been proven time after time that it's possible. But I would say still the majority of the risk surface or the threat that we have is still within the normal areas of laptops, networks, accounts, and so forth.
Those of us in the media do get very excited when there's a new car hacking story, but usually it's a researcher from ADAC or RAC or whoever it is who's proven some kind of vulnerability in theory, but from what you're saying, the kind of widespread exploitation of those, maybe still a little bit away from that, but laying the foundations is still very important.
Exactly.
I thought we'd deep dive today, Itay, into an area of expertise, which is incident response. As they say, failing to plan is planning to fail. And I know this is an important area of your work. So I thought we'd try to cover off some playbook items on how to deal with an information security incident. And certainly in Europe, or for any companies that deal with consumers who are based in Europe, time is a key consideration. GDPR Article 33 gives an organization up to 72 hours, I think, to report to a supervisory body in case of a data breach, for example. So there are lots of reasons why time is a really important asset when it comes to an incident, aren't there?
Yeah, so I was very lucky to have a quite significant part of my career in incident response. Before being a CISO, I was leading the incident response team for a consultancy company back in Israel. And I had the opportunity to work with countless enterprises, individuals, many types of exotic incidents around the world. Um, and I think, as you said, there are aspects that are regulatory which you have to comply with. You have to report something in a certain amount of time. But I think um, time is even more important. I mean, the 72 hours is already late in an incident, right? Um, Often, once the incident has been identified, it's already very late, right? Something has already happened, or not always, but many times something's already happened. And the clock actually started much earlier, right? Um, and I think the first few hours, the first 1 or 2 days could be so critical, and buying time for the company to decide how to approach the incident, who's going to do what is the general approach to this new event, new catastrophic sometimes event that hit the company. Um, Time is super critical. Every decision or every change in decision could cost a lot of time and often a lot of money. A lot of companies that I used to work with bled a lot of millions of dollars every day that they were not in production because of, for example, a ransomware attack. There are certain ways where a company can actually buy time or at least avoid losing it. And I think this is a very key part that most organizations that I've worked with in the past sometimes lack the understanding until they reached the event of an incident.
Okay, right. So, strategies for managing time as best as possible. I guess you need to identify that there has been an incident in the first place, ensuring that whatever measures you, whatever systems you have in place to identify that something isn't right, that there has been an exfiltration of data or a unwarranted access to systems. That's thing one. But then there is the processes that then need to kick in. How do we respond to this incident as well in as timely a manner as possible, but also as effectively as possible? Because you can respond to an incident by running around and waving your hands in the air, but that's not particularly effective. So, how do you ensure that you can be timely and that when you do spring into action, you can make the most of the time that you have available? What are your key strategies there, Isai?
So I think pre-alignment between the major stakeholders on who's responsible for what. You know, there can only be one chef in the kitchen, at least for every area of where the business is trying to move towards. That's key because often what you see is there is an incident. There are many different kinds of responses across mainly across the leadership of the company, right? Some people do not believe that something is happening or that they find it hard to accept. Others get angry. Others become silent. It's really the first few hours are always very confusing, but then most often everybody wants to jump in and help, and sometimes that actually causes more time loss and more problems because there are multiple directions. It's unclear for the organization, usually huge organizations. They need to know where to go. In these kind of situations, simplicity, clear instructions, clear direction. This is the most important parts. And when that is missing, you're missing a lot of efficiency and wasting a lot of time. So to your question, preparedness and alignment on who's deciding what, I think this is crucial for incidents.
This all needs to be documented. This all needs, first of all, there needs to be some decisions made about who has responsibility for everything from communications to regulatory bodies to communications to consumers, if indeed it is a personal information data breach. That's thing one. But thing two is that then those policies need to be written and that the actions that each responsible person has, they need to A, be aware of those, and B, have an opportunity to practice them as well. And as I say from my time in enterprise, that if you don't restore from a backup, then you don't know that that backup works. And it's the same with the kind of planning and the fire drills, if you like, in an incident. You need to go through that exercise and at least put somebody in the position of there is pressure on me. What do I do next? Oh, yes, there's a policy for this somewhere. How do you create those environments where people who have responsibilities in an incident can get that muscle memory, get that kind of mental muscle built as to what they need to do and how quickly?
So I think writing the policies is not the hard part. It's often very easy, right? The hard
Yeah.
part is, like you said, practicing these. It also plays in different levels, right? There are the people who have to run and act, which is also requires practice, but a different kind of practice. And there's leadership, which you need a complete different type of practice. And it's sometimes even more resilient and emotional practice than it is practical practice of which backup do you restore, right? And I think that's where the biggest impact can be. I fully agree. You have to train your restoring your backups. That's for sure. But I think again, the people who are leading the company, who are leading this big effort, this big event, if they are missing, it has so many areas of impact that me as a CISO, right, I focus a lot on these people and how they're going to act when something happens. And the way to do it, I think, is to find every bit of opportunity that you have throughout the year, in normal days, in the day-to-day operations, and use every opportunity that you have to learn about incident management, even if it's a very small one, even if it's something small that happened and two persons took over and gave different directions. If you don't take them after this incident and tell them, hey, who's the one of you, you have to decide now, who is the person that next time makes the decision. Once you have a big incident, it's going to happen again, and then you're going to pay for it. So really taking those opportunities to learn and to constantly improve and really being precise on how you are learning from these incidents or events.
Humans, we don't tend to make our best decisions when we're under stress. How do you find what are the ways in which you can help humans to, in the event that something bad has happened within an organization, how that they can respond most effectively, respond practically, not necessarily respond to the emotional stress of the situation that they're in?
I think a lot of people in stress situations respond well to simple and clear leadership and directions. When there is something to do, when people have something that they can do, they immediately spring into action rather than allowing or letting people try to figure out what they have to do at a certain time, right? That brings in insecurity, uncertainty, puts in a lot of room for emotions and friction. And I think the sooner, the faster there is clear leadership, clear instructions on where to go, this usually works best. And obviously, you need those pivotal persons that can deal with this pressure, and they will not have the person to tell them what to do. So they have to be those strong persons that can just deal with it. You need to identify them. You need to
Mm.
give them this opportunity to lead in these circumstances and then push forward.
And I guess it's everything from the communications plan. You know, if our IT systems have gone down and we can't use Slack or email or Teams or whatever it is, then having a backup there, you know, how are people going to get in touch with you if the internal systems have gone down or if the mobile network's gone down? But then also having backups for your personnel as well. If you, for example, as the CISO at Sixt, were on holiday or were unavailable, or heaven forbid, were involved in an incident that makes you unavailable, making sure that you have backup people ready to jump into the role that needs to be fulfilled in the event of an incident. Let's play out a little scenario. For example, a ransomware attack where some threat actors have scrambled up some data and are asking you for money, essentially, or asking an organization that you're responsible for money. How do you tend to go into those situations where you've got a couple of options? You can either negotiate with the bad actor, um, or try to get your data back another way. What insights do you have from that bad actor negotiation piece?
I think we talked about time before, right? And I think eventually a ransomware incident, in the most part, is a business thing, right? The hacker,
Hmm.
they want to get money. they want to get it as fast as they can with the least effort as they can because they need to move to the next victim, unfortunately. And this is where it becomes a business deal, unfortunately. And as hard as it is to describe it this way, it is what it is. And then you need to figure out what are your targets at any point of time in this deal or in this correspondence. And the first thing you want to do, as we said, the first 2 or 3 days are super critical in terms of time. Usually, when there's a ransomware, you also get a clock that ticks down for pressure for many, many reasons. And I think the first thing you want to do is buy time. And why do you want to buy time? You want to buy time because you want to understand what was the impact, what happened to you. You want to come up with a strategy. You want to get everybody together to maybe not everybody's even in the factories or in the office that they can take care. And there is almost no downsides to buying time. So initiating negotiations with the other side is usually a good thing in my perspective. It doesn't have to end with a payment, but at least beginning the negotiation to buy time. Now, another thing that that I've seen was very, very important in these parts of just negotiating and interacting with the actor, which again, I had a privilege of doing multiple times. Sometimes you get invaluable intelligence of what happened. So sometimes the other side would even give you hints or even information on how they broke in, where was the vulnerability, what it was, can save you a lot of time and effort to identify it. And I think a big part of incident response, or especially in ransomware cases, is you need to take a risk-based approach. When do you bring something up? When do you turn on the production environment? And that piece, once you have a better understanding or you think you know what happened, you can much more easily accept those risk-based decisions to do stuff that could eventually cost millions. Waiting another day to bring up production could mean millions, right?
Yeah.
So I think negotiation in this regard is also something that can be very, very important.
I think that's a really interesting point that you raised there in terms of the information that you can get from the bad actors here about how they got in, because time and time again, whether it's physical security or information security, we hear about repeat victims, about how bad actors have found one way in, maybe as part of their infiltration of that enterprise, maybe found some other vulnerabilities as well, but being able to understand how they got in might save you money further on down the line, as that bad actor or another bad actor might have tried the same tactic to get in as well. In terms of the communication piece, though, and trust, I can imagine a situation, and for all I know, this may well have happened, though I can't think of a specific case study, where an organization has been held ransom and you've got other bad actors who are looking to almost jump on the top of that story and are setting up fake communications channels to try and get money out of you, even though they're not the ones who have the key necessarily to unlock that. So how do you ensure that the communication that you have is good communication, is trustworthy communication, and that ultimately you're not going to be fleeced at the end of the day by handing over the money, however you would do that, whatever discount you've negotiated, that ultimately you are able to get your data unlocked and access regained to your systems?
I don't know if about case studies, but I can tell you firsthand that I've experienced these cases where other groups would jump in and try to benefit from the situation. And not even to mention other groups that are trying to just exploit the situation where the company is vulnerable and just to hack it again, but rather just to use the situation. By the way, just a side note, we've also had cases where, I don't know, I hope most people who listen to this do not experience it ever, but when there's a ransomware, usually there's a ransom note left on all the desktops, or there's a note somewhere, and this note usually has a link to a Tor site, and then this is also available to all the employees, right? Everybody in the company. And we've also had cases where people within the company would start communicating to the actors, asking them, hey, did you steal my data? Can you bring it back? What do I pay you as an individual? And that would also damage the negotiations as well, right? So this is a very, very gray area where a lot of things can happen until you get these negotiations in place. About 2 years ago, the ransom groups understood this thing. And what they did is they started, also by the way, because media started jumping into those channels as well and talking to the ransomware groups.
Yes.
they immediately would move you to another more secure channel and provide you some evidence so that you can trust that they're the ones who are in your system. So they would provide you a file tree, or they would provide you some evidence that they are the ones who actually have the access. And obviously part of the negotiation is to verify that those things, that you're talking to the actual person who has your data or has access to your network. But that's also where you can gain a lot of very valuable information.
Really interesting stuff. Thank you so much for chatting us through that. And it's certainly not an area of work for someone. I know there are, like yourself, there are lots of specialists who do a lot of negotiation with bad actors in difficult circumstances like this. And I'm sure that on the other side as well, with the bad actors, there are professional negotiators who are used to negotiating with you guys, and it's like, oh, it's Itay again. Hi. Right, 50%, 70%. I mean, is there business, finally, is there business to be done? I guess a figure does get set, but typically are you looking for a, right, 20%, okay, 50%? Is there that kind of haggling that takes place?
Yeah, 100%. Usually you could expect something between 5 to 10% of the company's revenue, what is published in Google as the first demand, which could be huge, tens of millions of dollars.
Wow, okay.
But you can also expect the negotiation to take it out by 80 or 90%. It really depends on a lot of factors. Some of them, how quickly the company could recover, remove the hacker from their systems. And that could also obviously impact the negotiation, as we said before. Just like business negotiation, whoever has the leverage at this point of time, sometimes the hacker, the attackers, the ransomware group would think that they have very valuable information, but if you can show them that it's actually not that valuable, maybe you can take the price down or vice versa. So there's a lot of aspects to these negotiations, and they can sometimes take weeks until you really reach this final goal where not everybody's happy, but at least you reach this price where you can basically make a deal.
And of course, on the extended business side of that, cybersecurity and ransomware insurance policies are definitely a growing area as well. But maybe we'll have that conversation another day here on CXO Secrets. But Itay, thank you so much for chatting us through that. One thing that we don't negotiate with on this show is the questions that we ask to all of our guests at the end. So my question to you, Itay, is what is your secret? If you were to put your modesty to one side for a moment, what would you say is your key attribute, or maybe what someone else would say is your key attribute, learning, or experience that's helped to steer you in the place towards where you are now?
I think Mike Tyson has a saying I really like. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. So I really like that one. And I think it's mainly battle scars, right? I think I've just seen a lot, not as a CISO, but as a consultant. I've seen a lot of companies go through these incidents. I've seen a lot of great leaders go through those incidents and seeing firsthand how they react, how they deal with their teams, how they talk to their employees. These kind of experiences really help you take these incidents, not in an emotional way, but rather in a very logical and business oriented way. And I think that also helps me in my day to day, because everything is eventually a business decision. Everything, if you go from a risk-based approach, every decision you take a risk, you don't take it, but eventually it's a business decision. And if you're able to remove all emotions from these decisions, then I think you can really reach the right decisions for you eventually from a logical perspective. So I think having this experience really helps me in my day to day, but obviously, hopefully nothing happens, but if it does.
That experience, that's very difficult to replicate. You can go to university, you can do online courses, you can read as much and write as much as you like, but having that experience of having been at the sharp end of a number of incidents, being able to react rationally rather than emotionally, particularly in a stressful situation, that is what makes you so valuable to companies when there is an incident. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
We also do a pass the question here on CXO Secrets, and each guest gets to ask a question to the guest in the next episode, even though we don't know who they will be. Our last guest, Dan Sorensen, who's a CISO and cyber intelligence officer at US Air National Guard, he wanted to ask you this.
I look back at life, and at the end of the day, I see that most of us don't say we want to work more. We always want to spend more time with friends and family and do things we enjoy and take care of our health. So my question is, what is it that you're going to do to leave a legacy behind. So it's not just, things you've done, your job, but how are you going to mentor and train others behind you and also set the world up for more success after us?
How would you respond to that, Itay?
I think I have a very big passion for cybersecurity and tech, but also for entrepreneurship and innovation. And what I try to do is spend as much time as I can. Sometimes I don't have as much as I would want with founders in cybersecurity startups, talking to them and working with them about what they're building and what they're creating, or sometimes even after some years that they were already running. And that, I think, helps also shape not only my team or have an impact on what I'm doing or what we're doing at the company I'm working at the moment or in the future, but rather have a different kind of impact on the security community, on security products we're seeing out there, on approaches to security. And coming from Israel, a lot of those founders are also very close friends. So working with close friends is always nice. So I think that's one of the things I try to do a lot.
Finally, if you could pose one question to our next guest on the show, whoever they are, whatever, whether they're a CISO or a CDO or a CIDO, what would that question be?
I would like to ask, who do they look for inspiration and for mentorship?
Good question. We haven't had that so far this season. So I look forward to hearing whoever it is. I look forward to hearing their response. For now, Itay Livne, thank you so much indeed for joining us here on CXO Secrets.
Thank you, David.